Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and happy Mother's Day to everybody out there, and to all the mothers out there. Hope you're all having a great Sunday. Posting something on Sunday afternoon, I usually don't do that. I had actually originally posted the majority of this video on Friday, or was it Saturday? I noticed there were some issues where I had misidentified some cities and just in general some glaring errors that I had to go back and edit. So it was posted for maybe 2 hours or so you may have seen this, but the majority of you probably haven't, so I'm reposting the edited version. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll just jump back out into the original part of the video now. Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm returning to Close Combat 2, A Bridge Too Far, the second of the Close Combat series, which looks at the Operation Market Garden and one of the all-time classic real-time strategy games. Now this is part 4 of a series that I'm doing on Close Combat 2, and last time we left, we were talking about sort of the history of the German military after D-Day, sort of some of the struggles that the Germans had in the Western Front, and kind of brought the German army up to the just before Operation Market Garden. I had originally intended to make this video about the American and British forces and the Commonwealth forces in the lead up to Market Garden and kind of get to what the real cause of the operation was. But something happened in the last video that I posted. Several people kind of posted a link where I was talking about that, and also in the previous video I was kind of giving some foreshadowing about the logic behind Market Garden, and some people posted a video to a YouTube channel called Tik, T-I-K, which is a individual who does a lot of documentaries on World War II, makes his own documentaries. Started off actually with making Close Combat 2 videos and some other gaming stuff, but now principally does some historical documentaries. And I know some of you complained last time that you didn't really think me talking history while playing this game really worked all that well. I will talk more about the game after we get out of this battle, but the particular battle we're in right now is sort of the Arnhem suburbs, and these are our forces from the very first mission, which was the taking of the rail bridge, or the detonation of the rail bridge. The forces that survive that get to the Arnhem suburbs and then get to drive on Arnhem Bridge itself. So you sort of have carryover casualties. I didn't get a chance to bring any additional reinforcements or anything like that. What I will say is I sort of raced past the town to the north along the river. Didn't really meet with any resistance, and now I'm circling back around to deal with the German forces on this map. But there's not very many on the map right now, so we're just going to kind of let this play out, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the topic I'm covering, and once we conclude this battle, then we'll talk a little bit about the next fight, and more of the gameplay. So in short, Teek's video, he did an actual like an hour and a half or 2 hour documentary on Market Garden, which is incredibly interesting and detailed, and I'm not going to get to that level of detail in my own series. I'm focusing more on gameplay with smatterings of history, and I really enjoyed the series. He knows a lot more about Market Garden than I do, but he made a follow-up which was about 15 minutes long, and in this video he's talking about the real cause, or the real objective of Operation Market Garden. And just as a refresher, sort of the history that we all learn, the history that gets told around Operation Market Garden, is that it was an attempt by the Allies, specifically the British, to land airborne forces across 3 major sort of bridges or areas. There's more than 3 bridges, but sort of 3 sectors in Holland that would then let armored forces under 30 Corps race across these bridges, which should, according to the plan, be captured intact. The final bridge being over the town of Arnhem would get the Allies over the Rhine, and then they could drive into the Ruhr, which is sort of Germany's industrial heartland, and by taking the Ruhr, win the war before Christmas in 1944. That's the high-level plan. Now, what Tik is claiming is that was not actually the plan. He was claiming that it was a more limited objective, and it's an interesting discussion. If you actually look at the source material, as Tik says you should, it is an interesting discussion. The claim he makes is that Eisenhower very clearly lays out that was not, in fact, the objective. The objective was to land across these bridges, drive 30 Corps across the bridges, but then turn 30 Corps north to the Südsee, which is sort of this bay just to the north and east of Antwerp in Holland. It would thus allow the Allies to drive to the coast in Holland, cut off the Germans, which were still back in and around the Scheldt estuary, which was cutting off the Allies' ability to use Antwerp for supplies. The Germans had lost Amsterdam to the Allies, but the Allies had failed to take the Scheldt estuary, which, those of you who are unfamiliar with Antwerp, Antwerp is a city that is a major port. At the time, it had a similar capacity to the port of New York City. So really the type of facility the Allies needed in order to enable them to drive deep into Germany, they needed that massive supply hub of Antwerp up and running. But it wasn't running because Antwerp is inland a bit. It's not right on the coast. So there's actually a channel or a river or whatever that travels from the ocean to the city that allows ships to get into Antwerp. And the Germans had lost Antwerp, but they had not lost the approaches to Antwerp. They still controlled the waterways leading to the city. And so what Tick is claiming, and he does provide some valuable sources, including Eisenhower, to back up this claim, was that the objective of Market Garden was not to drive into the Ruhr and win the war by Christmas. Rather, the objective of Market Garden was to get over the Rhine, turn north, cut off the German 15th Army, which was defending the Scheldt estuary and blocking Allied supplies from Antwerp, and by cutting off that army, more easily reduce it and allow these supplies to flow into the armies of the Allies. In principle, that makes sense. And frankly, it was the far more rational and sort of limited objective than it's often portrayed. It wasn't portrayed as this war-winning, sort of overreaching, mission. It was portrayed as this, more reasonable, more Eisenhower-esque sort of approach. And I think where I disagree with Tick is not that that's what Eisenhower was thinking. I think there's a sufficient amount of evidence to suggest that Eisenhower was thinking, okay, Market Garden will get us across the Rhine. It will give us a bridgehead, which we can then drive east from. But principally the objective is still remains to take the city of Antwerp, and this will help us do that by cutting off the German army that's defending the river up to Antwerp. Antwerp had already been taken, but again, the war was not, the port was not open yet. And I don't disagree with Tick that that was indeed likely Eisenhower's mind. Although Eisenhower does make the claim that this operation will also give them a bridgehead over the Rhine and outflank the main German armies, so Eisenhower is well aware that this mission sort of will have a dual purpose. It'll help them take Antwerp, but it will also set them up for a drive into the Ruhr. And Tick kind of seems to dismiss this a bit. Again, this is a 2-year-old video, so I'm not calling Tick out. I'm just sort of reiterating my view is that Market Garden was not sort of this false history where we remember it as one thing when in fact it was another. I think the problem is in modern combat operations, in modern wars, objectives may not be the same for everybody, right? To assume that the objective of Market Garden was to cut off the German army in the Scheldt estuary area and take Antwerp, and that this drive into the Ruhr was just this fanciful creation that Monty made up after the war in order to protect his legacy, in order to justify the cost, in order to say, listen, Market Garden was indeed worthwhile because it would have ended the war early, which is kind of what Tick is suggesting, seems to me disingenuous and overly simplified. I think it's fair to say that Eisenhower probably was thinking, all right, this will allow us to outflank the Germans here, it'll allow us to more easily take Antwerp, and then it will, alleviate this massive supply problem, which he'd been having because at the end of the day, his supplies had to travel all the way from Normandy and Cherbourg, all the way to his front lines over 300 miles away. Antwerp would dramatically simplify this issue. But to assume that Montgomery had a similar view of the operation, and again, the plan was Montgomery's plan, seems to me a little bit simplified. And the reason I say this is Eisenhower approved this plan with limited priority, despite the fact that he had been pushing back against Monty for quite some time to give him priority, quite some time to give him sort of an emphasis. He wanted to continue this broad front strategy, and in short, Montgomery and Patton were sort of petitioning Eisenhower to give them priority so that they would get maximum amounts of supplies at the other's expense, and then they could drive deep into Germany and win glory for themselves and victory for the Allies. And Eisenhower continued to push back, saying that we need a broad front strategy, we need to attack everywhere simultaneously, it'll keep the Germans off balance, it'll prevent them from being able to launch local counterattacks, it'll make them less effective on the defense, etc., etc., etc. And Monty had been trying for quite some time to lobby Eisenhower to get priority and had not been able to do it. And eventually he got some level of prioritization. It wasn't a full priority. It was a limited prioritization from Eisenhower to Monty in order to conduct Operation Market Garden. And the logic clearly, as Tick lays out in Ike's mind, is to cut off the 15th Army, the 15th German Army defending the Scheldt Estuary, and thus reduce Antwerp more easily. But that, again, the plan was Monty's, and his claim in his memoirs after the war that it was really aimed at the Ruhr, to me, strikes truthfully. To me, it seems logical. But that doesn't mean that Eisenhower has to agree. Eisenhower has this very clear view that the operation is not to do that. The operation is to take Antwerp. Here's the thing, though. Monty has kind of a history of misleading Eisenhower and other figures in order to get what he wants. He misled the Allies in the run-up to Normandy in order to be able to get heavy bombers for the bombardment on the D-Day beaches. He misled, or at least Eisenhower felt he misled Eisenhower about the intent of Operation Goodwood, which was a major Commonwealth attack ahead of Operation Cobra, which would break the Allies out of Normandy and drive into the countryside of France and really start liberating France. There was a British operation named Operation Goodwood, which Eisenhower, anyway, I don't know enough about the operation to say whether this was truly Monty's intent or not, but Eisenhower was of the opinion that Montgomery had promised him a breakout in his attack, and when the breakout did not materialize, Eisenhower felt he had been misled. Now, to me, that's a similar situation. It's a situation where Eisenhower feels like he's being misled by Monty. He had a different view of what the operation was in his head, and, that's what you have there. You have Monty sort of having his own vision for what Goodwood would be, or perhaps just protecting himself after the fact. And you have Eisenhower with a very different view of what Operation Goodwood would be. I see no reason why Market Garden wouldn't be the same. Monty says, okay, we'll get over these rivers, we'll break around the German Siegfried Line, this entrenched fortifications all along the German border, and we will expose the Ruhr and perhaps Berlin as well. Monty's seeing the strategic reality is that if we do this, we get this advantage by cutting off this whole German army. Eisenhower's seeing that advantage by cutting off a whole German army. But what Monty really sees is, hey, listen, this may not be the plan. This may not be what Eisenhower is signing up for. But if the facts on the ground change, we have a record of changing our objectives. What I mean by that is in the previous video, we talked about the operations in and around Brittany. The Allies' plan, landing in Normandy, was not to break out and liberate Paris and drive all the way to Holland as quickly as they did. The plan was actually to reduce the German ports in Brittany so that they could be opened up for Allied supplies. And then, only then, once Brittany had been liberated, then the Allies would sort of turn to the liberation of the rest of France. Well, that plan got shelved the minute the Allies broke out in Operation Cobra. Once the Allies broke out, the German army was disintegrating, it was vanishing. The Allies took the bull by the horn, the facts on the ground changed, Brittany wasn't important at the time, and the overall operational goals changed. I think it's pretty likely that Monty could have had an alternative motive. He may have said, okay, Eisenhower, I know you're really thinking this is about the Scheldt Estuary, but at the end of the day, if we break across the Rhine, the Germans are disorganized. This first army that's defending against us is an army in name only. It's just sort of a scattering of troops. If we break over the Rhine and we're able to just turn into Germany with no major obstacle between us and the Ruhr, why the hell aren't we going to do it? If the facts on the ground change and Monty goes to Ike and says, hey, listen, you want me to reduce Antwerp, I can do that, but you have an open road to Berlin and you're not taking it. The political pressure in that situation that would heap upon Eisenhower would almost ensure if Monty wanted to drive into the Ruhr and into the heart of Germany, it would have happened. if the facts on the ground supported it. And I think they do. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying Monty had a history of misleading Eisenhower about his plans. Monty created Market Garden, and Eisenhower had one view of Market Garden, but it's almost certain that Monty had a very different view about the purpose of the operation. Again, if it succeeds, and then he gets prioritization of everything so that he can drive his attack forward, he's going to be the hero of the entire European campaign. He can sort of surpass Patton, who he's sort of got this fanatical rivalry with, and then he can, gain the glory that he so rightly seeks. I don't think that just because Monty writes in his memoir that it's all about the Ruhr necessarily means that it in fact wasn't. He got that idea from somewhere. It wasn't a complete fabrication. And to say that Monty and Ike were in sync about the actual objectives of Market Garden, to me, seems a little bit disingenuous, because both of those generals have a long history of not being in sync about just anything. Eisenhower, in a couple of post-war interviews even, had some really sort of sharp words and negative words about Monty, where he was talking about essentially the fact that Monty would really do anything or say anything to protect his own reputation, to get his own way, and that kind of matches up. Now, on the flip side of that, admittedly, that could match up with saying he's lying after the war, but I think far more likely, Monty is a general, he's savvy, he understands politics. What he's seeing is, okay, I'm going to let Eisenhower think that this is this objective. It's this limited objective. It's not going to end the war. It's just going to accomplish some useful sort of things for us. But it won't fundamentally shift the balance of power. But he may think that. But the reality is that if this is successful, it's a fundamental shift in the actual sort of situation on the front, and Eisenhower won't have any chance. He will have no political flexibility, no ability to ignore me. He will have to give me what I want and allow me to complete the defeat of Germany. And that's where I think Market Garden is. I think Market Garden is an assault on Antwerp indirectly, as Tick suggests. But as Tick sort of ignores, it is also very likely a situation where the two high commanders involved don't see eye to eye and have different views of what the value of this operation will be. And that's where I fall. Again, this is a 2-year-old video that Tick did, so I'm not really trying to call him out in any way. I'm just sort of explaining that, in my view, Market Garden isn't this sort of elaborate, false history that we all remember, that it was really about something else. It was different things to different people, and that's the complicated thing about war. Two different people in the same conflict often see two very different things, and because of that, it can be challenging to understand history. You can read the source material and come away with two very different opinions. And while source material is important, it's also important to understand the sort of context and the history that came before in these kinds of operations. And so moving away from sort of the historical discussion, what's going on the screen in front of you? Well, I haven't done a good job of explaining that while I'm talking about the history, so let's just give a quick recap. We are currently fighting the battle for Somme Bridge. We have about 30 seconds left before that bridge will be detonated. We've attacked in the north and successfully destroyed one enemy gun pit and are turning south to the town of Somme itself. In the east, we've kind of been stopped cold by German forces that seem to heavily outnumber us. So this is going to be a challenging fight. With that said, one sort of glaring weakness or glaring error of Close Combat 2 is the ability to declare a ceasefire when there's really no reason to do so. So in this battle here, you can see we're trying to kind of pin them in the front. We're trying to flank them around the north. You can see that smoking 88. But what'll happen is if the timer gets too low, that red timer that indicates when the bridge will be blown, if that timer gets too low for comfort, all I have to do is request a ceasefire. The AI will almost always accept it. And then if they do that, then we come back into the next battle with the bridge still standing. So it's a little bit gamey to be able to be like, all right, you're about to blow it. You're 5 seconds away from blowing the bridge. Let's go ahead and have a ceasefire, and then let's kind of resume this in a couple of hours. That to me seems silly, but with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. So you can see here the battle ended in a ceasefire. The bridge remains intact. The Allies gained control of some victory locations, those 3 victory locations in the center north of the map. The Allied progress, or expected progress, is 41 out of a potential 30, and we lost 6 casualties to the enemy's 7, and that does it for this particular phase in the Battle of Somme Bridge. And there you have it. So that, I think, makes for a good stopping point in this particular video. I know we've only about 20 minutes here. So just sort of sharing my thoughts. Operation Market Garden, it was about the Ruhr. It was also about Antwerp. It was about both things to different people. This video here is part 4 in our Let's Play series of Close Combat 2. In our next video, we will dive into more detail about the actual Allied planning of the operation, the objectives of the operation, and perhaps get into the actual beginning of the deployment and actual combat of the operation. But again, that's a video for another time. So with that being said, before we jump into the next battle, I'm going to go ahead and sign out. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts below, and if you agree with me, disagree with me, I'll go ahead and link Tick's channel in the description as well. You know, I don't actually watch a ton of YouTube myself, but he's one of those guys that I actually am going to go ahead and spend time and watch and whatnot, because he does some really good documentaries. But that's enough of me rambling at this point. I hope you guys are enjoying the video and the series now that we've returned to it. And until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.